My son and his wife locked my husband and me in the basement of our own home while shouting, "This is ours now." As we sat in the cold darkness, I heard my husband whisper, "Quiet. They don't know what's behind that wall." And in that moment, I realized he had kept a secret from me for 39 years. Hello, dear listeners. Before I begin, I'd be grateful if you subscribed and shared where you're listening from. It always warms my heart to see how far our stories travel. Now, let me take you back. The house that breathed with Eustace House isn't just wood and brick. It breathes. In the mornings, when the Georgia sunlight breaks through the pecan trees, the house takes a slow breath in, and dust glimmers like tiny stars. In the evening, it exhales, the beams settling with soft, tired sighs. I've lived here for 40 years. These walls know me, and I know them. My father-in-law built this home as a legacy somewhere future grandchildren could run, laugh, and grow. Not a vacation house, but a family's heart. The first crack in our piece that morning, I was making chicken soup, simple broth with dumplings, the recipe my grandmother passed down. Cornelius hasn't had much appetite lately, but that smell, sometimes it brings back memories for him. I was chopping carrots, tiny and bright, remembering how our son, Travanti, used to stand on a stool beside me with his little hands wrapped around a safety knife. "Mama, I'm a chef," he'd shout. His laughter still lives in the grain of the kitchen table. Then a voice cut through the air like a cold wind. "This tasteless slop again, Miss Adela." Kesha, my daughter-in-law, leaned against the door frame in her silk robe, arms crossed. She never called me Mom, only Miss Adela, with a politeness so cold it felt like an insult. She rolled her eyes. There are a million recipes online. Broccoli soup, gazpacho, something modern. It's for Travanti. He needs proper nutrition. I didn't look at her. "Your husband likes this soup," I said quietly. "And his father loves it too. His father doesn't understand anything anymore," she snapped. How they slowly took over. They've lived with us for 3 years, ever since Cornelius had his first stroke. At first it felt right. Family should be together in hard times. I gave them the entire second floor, the master suite, the balcony overlooking the garden. Cornelius and I moved downstairs so he wouldn't have to climb stairs, but slowly. Their presence replaced ours. Their perfumes, their loud voices, their arguments about money, their modern furniture that didn't match the house's soul. Last week, she moved Cornelius's father's armchair, the one he read the Savannah Tribune in every morning. She shoved it into a dark corner and replaced it with a cold white chair made of leather and metal. "It doesn't fit the modern interior," she said. I didn't argue. That night, when the house was quiet, I went downstairs and touched the old cracked leather. It felt like comforting an old friend. The weight of years. Cornelius was lying in his old study, staring at the ceiling. His body is weak now, but his mind, every now and then, it sparks like a glowing ember. I held his hand. "How are you, my love?" He breathed out. "They're noisy." Yes, they always were. Their laughter never belonged in this quiet house. When lunchtime came, Travanti walked in without saying hello. He didn't even look at me, just stared at his phone. I placed soup in front of him. He pushed it away. "Ma, we need to talk," he said. Kesha appeared instantly, eyes sharp like a hunter. Travanti didn't look up from his phone. "With the inheritance and Dad's condition, it would be easier if you signed the house over to me now. Just a formality." My heart went cold. Not because of the idea, but because of how casually he said it. "No," I said firmly. "As long as your father and I are alive, nothing changes." Kesha leaned in. "You want your son to deal with paperwork later. Think about how hard that will be when, well, you know, I understand perfectly," I replied. "And the answer is still no." Travanti finally looked at me, and there was no love in his eyes. "Only annoyance. You're making this harder. Ma, we live here. We take care of father. You live in our house," I said softly. And I'd take care of your father. The moment everything broke, Cornelius appeared in the doorway, breathing heavily. He must have heard everything. But his eyes, they were clear, sharper than I'd seen in years. He didn't look at me. He looked at our son, you. He whispered, "You are a disgrace to our name." The words struck like lightning. Travanti exploded. He leapt to his feet, knocking the chair over. A disgrace. Me, I am the only one carrying this name. This house is mine by right. He grabbed me by the shoulder, not to hurt me, but to move me aside. Then he lifted his father like a rag doll. I screamed, tried to pull them apart, but Travanti was wild with anger. He dragged us to the basement door. "Since you want to make things difficult, you can stay down here and think about it." He shoved us inside. I almost fell, but clutched Cornelius tightly. The door slammed. A bolt slid across from the outside. Darkness swallowed us. In the dark with a secret sat on the cold steps. I held Cornelius close. I could hear my own breath shaking, hear his faint rasps. Years of love, years of care, all ending in a basement. Then, in that heavy silence, Cornelius leaned close to my ear. "Hush," he whispered. "They don't know what's behind that wall, above us." I heard footsteps, a door slam, a car engine fade away. They were gone. Cornelius tugged my arm. His voice trembled, but it carried a strange strength. "Help me up." We made our way down the stairs. The basement smelled of damp earth, old shelves, forgotten jars. A thin strip of light glowed under the door upstairs. Cornelius led me to the far wall. The foundation stones were cold and rough. "Here," he whispered. "Father showed me this when I was 18. Said it was only for the worst moment. I hoped I'd never use it." He guided my hand to a stone. "Press." "I can't," I pushed. At first nothing. Then the stone slid inward with a soft scrape behind. It was a dark hole. Inside was a small metal boxer, tobacco tin. Cornelius struggled with the latch until it clicked open. Inside were a few folded papers. I expected money, jewels, something valuable, but what we found rewrote everything I knew. A birth certificate, a name I had never heard. Cassius Thorne. Born in a prison hospital in Mississippi. Cornelius whispered, "That's me. My real name." My heart dropped. For 40 years I believed he was Cornelius Dubois, the son of a respected man. But now, in the dim basement light, my marriage shifted beneath my feet. There was an adoption decree, then a letter in his father's handwriting. I read it slowly. "Son, if you're reading this, then dark times have come. Your father, Orion Thorne, was a brave and honest man, but honesty is dangerous in this country. He was accused, imprisoned, and died unjustly. I adopted you to protect you from his fate. Carry the Dubois name with honor, but never forget whose blood runs in your veins." And there, in that cold basement, holding the secret his father hid for decades, I finally understood. My husband had been protecting his past just as fiercely as I had been trying to protect our home. I read the letter to the end and folded it slowly. The coldness that had started in the basement was no longer from the room, it was coming from inside me. It spread through my chest, sharp and steady. Cornelius had lived with this truth for decades. He protected a name that wasn't his by blood. And our son, our only child, built his entire identity on that name. His pride, his job, his sense of superiority, all of it rested on a foundation that didn't belong to him. Every insult I had swallowed over the years, every moment they made me feel small, all at once tightened inside my heart. But it didn't burst into tears or anger. Instead, it froze. And in that cold quietness, I saw everything clearly. I was an archivist. I had spent years working with old documents, forgotten histories, erased truths. I knew the weight that one piece of paper could carry. What I held wasn't just a secret. It was leverage. It was power. Locked away but not defeated, who stayed in the darkness for hours. Cornelius eventually drifted to sleep on my shoulder, exhausted. I didn't move. My mind, for the first time in years, worked with perfect precision, calm, sharp, focused. A plan began to take shape. Finally, footsteps echoed above us. The bolt scraped open. Light burst into the basement, blinding me after so long in the dark. Travanti stood there, smug and self-satisfied. "Well," he asked with a smirk, "have you thought things through?" He added with a mocking concern, "Father, do you feel dizzy? Should I call a nurse?" I stood up. My voice surprised even me, calm and steady. "Yes, he needs care. Give me the phone." "I'll call." He blinked, caught off guard by my sudden cooperation. Then he shrugged and handed me his cell phone. I dialed a number I had memorized years ago. A woman picked up quickly. "Veta Sterling speaking." "Miss Sterling." "Good afternoon," I replied, keeping my tone even. "My name is Adela Dubois. I urgently need your help. I arranged a meeting." When I gave the phone back to Travanti, he scrolled through the call log, confused by the unfamiliar number. He assumed it was a home care service. A pleased smile tugged at his lips. "Good girl," he muttered proudly. As if I were a dog obeying its master, he and Kesha helped Cornelius to his room, fussing over him, dramatically adjusting pillows, bringing water, all for show. They wanted to appear gracious, caring, in control. I watched silently. They mistook my silence for defeat. That was their first mistake. A house filled with fake peace days passed quietly. I moved around the house like a shadow, cooking, cleaning, tending to Cornelius. They grew comfortable ignoring me. They spoke freely in front of me, discussing plans as if I couldn't hear or didn't matter. One morning, Kesha flipped through a magazine and said, "Honey, if we remove the wall between the living room and father's study, we'll have a huge open space, perfect for a bar counter." The skillet almost slipped from my hand. That wall held decades of memories: my father-in-law's desk, the faint pencil mark of our son's height at age 5, Cornelius's early notes. And she wanted to tear it down for a marble bar. "Great idea," Travanti said without looking up. "The study will be free soon anyway. And the library, we can sell the books or recycle them. Who reads anymore? Recycle the books my father-in-law treasured. Rare editions on Black history. Signed copies from Harlem Renaissance writers." I placed the biscuits on the table with a steady hand. Inside, something broke. The last piece of hope that my son still had a trace of goodness snapped clean in two. They looked at my calm expression and believed I was too old and tired to care. They didn't know that I was studying them like a surgeon studies an illness. Greed, vanity, arrogance. This wasn't just bad behavior. It was a sickness. The final straw. Tuesday night, they approached me with solemn faces while I sat reading poems to Cornelius. "Mom," Travanti began, using a tone you'd reserve for someone terminally ill, "we know life has been hard for you. You deserve rest." Kesha placed a cold, manicured hand on my shoulder. "We found a wonderful senior living community. Not a nursing home, a lovely place outside Atlanta, Pine Forest. You'll have your own room, walking paths, meals, medical care. We'll visit on weekends." They stood there, expecting gratitude. They were offering to send me away from my own home, the house I kept alive for 40 years. They wanted to uproot me like a weed and plant me somewhere to wither quietly while they decorated their new studio. I looked at my son's face, my own features reflected back at me, but cold and empty. I searched for guilt, shame, doubt, anything. There was nothing. In that moment, whatever remained of my love for him died quietly. No anger. No tears. Just a quiet ending. He was no longer my son. He was a stranger with my eyes, and strangely, I felt free. "That is a generous offer," I said softly. "I need to think." They smiled, relieved. They thought they'd won. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. The lawyer who knew the truth next day. I told them I needed to go into town for a special medicine. They nodded patronizingly. Kesha even straightened my collar like I was a child. Don't be long, Miss Adela. Lunch won't cook itself. I walked out, letting them believe I was an obedient old woman. But I wasn't going to the pharmacy. I was going to war. Veta Sterling's office was sleek and quiet. She was a sharp, focused woman about 40-someone who didn't waste words or energy. She listened to everything without interrupting. No dramatic reactions, no pity. Do you have documents confirming your ownership? She finally asked. I have something better, I said. I opened the tin box and laid the papers on her desk. The birth certificate, the adoption decree, the letter from Cornelius's adoptive father. She read them slowly, the expression on her face changing with each page. Finally, she looked up. Double quotes Mrs. Dubois. This changes everything. She explained that the Dubois name carried weight in specific circles socially, politically, historically, and my son had built his entire reputation on it. If it became known that he had no blood claim to that name, I want my home back, I said quietly. You will get far more than that, she replied. You will get justice. She asked to look deeper into the name Orion Thorne. Something about it stirred her memory. I went home and acted as if nothing had happened. Meanwhile, Kesha and Travanti carried on with their plans, ordering catalogues, measuring walls, talking about paint colors for a house they believed would soon be theirs. Every word they spoke hardened my resolve. A name that could break everything. A week later, Veta called while the house was empty. Double quotes Mrs. Dubois. Are you alone? Yes. Her voice trembled slightly. I found something, and it explains everything. I accessed old archives, unofficial ones. My breath caught. Orion Thorne wasn't just a political dissenter. He was a genius, one of the top theoretical physicists of his time. I felt a cold weight settle in my stomach. He refused to work on a project he believed could cause catastrophic harm. The government turned on him, forced him, broke him. They needed to silence him, so they invented a case, treason. Espionage. A closed trial. My husband's father had been brutally erased from history because he tried to protect the world from something dangerous. And suddenly, everything made sense. Why Langston Dubois hid Cornelius's past, why he changed his name, why he built a legacy of silence. And why my son would soon learn that the name he worshipped was built on a lie. His real name had been wiped from everywhere: old research papers, staff records, scientific archives. It was as if he had never lived at all. But in certain academic and government circles, people still remembered the name Orion Thorne, not as a brilliant scientist, but as a traitor, a stain on history, a label that stuck even after an entire generation had passed. I couldn't breathe. I sat down before my legs gave out. Do you understand what this means, Mrs. Dubois? Vita's voice lowered, but somehow became even clearer. Your son, Travanti, built his whole business on connections. He takes pride in his family name, his lineage, his clients. These are people who care about reputation more than anything. For them, a family name is a currency. They deal with him because he's the grandson of the respected Dr. Dubois. She paused. Now imagine what happens when the truth comes out that he's actually the grandson of Orion Thorne, a man they still whisper about as a traitor. There it was, the weapon I had been searching for. Only it wasn't a weapon, it was a bomb. This wasn't just something that could win my house back. It was something that could destroy the entire world my son had built for himself. This won't just take away his inheritance, Veta said. It will end him socially, professionally, financially. He will become an outcast. For him and his wife, that is worse than death. When the call ended, I sat in the kitchen, staring into silence. Sunlight streamed through the window. A small geranium bloomed on the sill. Everything looked the same, but the world had shifted under my feet. This wasn't just an argument anymore. It wasn't about an old house or a mother pushed aside. It was about the complete collapse of my son's carefully polished life. And I felt no horror, no regret, no motherly panic that should have screamed inside me. What I felt was cold, steady satisfaction. The calm certainty of justice. You tried to erase me. You tried to throw me away. You wanted to make my life disappear like I was a line on a page you didn't need any more. Very well, let's see how it feels when your life is erased, when everything you built, your pride, your name, your identity turns to dust from a single truth. I went to the window and looked out at the garden I planted with my own hands, at the old pecan tree where little Travanti once played. I wasn't saying goodbye to the man upstairs. I was saying goodbye to the boy I once loved with my whole heart. Goodbye forever. Because now I knew I would pull the trigger without hesitation. A car pulled up outside. They were home. My heartbeat stayed calm, cold, controlled, counting down the seconds until the end began. I walked into the hallway not as their servant, but as the true mistress of this house. They came in laughing, arms full of expensive shopping bags. Kesha held a roll of wallpaper samples. "Miss Adela, you're here," she said without looking at me. "Travanti, look. This pearl shade will be perfect for the foyer." They didn't notice anything. They didn't see how I had changed. 2 days later, on Saturday morning, the doorbell rang. Travanti went to open it. Irritated at the surprise visit, I waited in the living room. I knew exactly who it was. Veta Sterling walked in wearing a sharp dark suit and carrying a slim leather case. Behind her stood a serious-looking man with official documents. "Du Bois, Travanti Cornelius?" Veta asked calmly. Double quotes, "Yes, and you are," he said, sizing her up. "My name is Veta Sterling. I represent the owner of this house, Mrs. Adela Du Bois. These documents are for you." She handed him a thick envelope. He took it, confused. He looked at me, then at her. "Owner? What owner? This is my family's house. I suggest you read the documents," Veta said coolly. Kessia came out of the bedroom, frowning at the unfamiliar voices. Travanti ripped open the envelope. I watched the color drain from his face as he read. First confusion, then anger, then a loud, shaky laugh. "Eviction? Mama, seriously? You hired an actress to scare us? This is ridiculous." Kesha grabbed the papers from him and skimmed them. Her sneer was instant. "Miss Adela, we thought you were slipping into apathy, but look at you writing scripts. How sweet. But we don't have time for this nonsense." She strutted to the credenza, pulled out a folder, and removed a document. "Here is the real deed," she said proudly. "The house belongs to my husband, so you can take your little papers elsewhere." She handed it to Veta. Veta held it up to the light, studied it carefully. Her expression didn't change. "Fascinating document," she said at last. "Especially the notary's seal. Mr. Henderson. A pity he died 2 years ago." Silence hit the room like a hammer. Kesha froze. Travanti's smile collapsed. What do you mean?" Kesha stammered. "I mean, this is a forgery," Veta replied calmly. "A sloppy one. It will take a forensic lab one day to prove it. After that, the charges won't be about eviction, they'll be about fraud, a felony. Several years in prison." Travanti lunged forward, red with rage. "Who are you to threaten us in our house?" "I'm not threatening," she said. "I'm stating facts." She turned slightly. "This property belongs to my client. It is confirmed by Langston Du Bois's will, which I have in my possession. The will clearly states that his only heir is his daughter-in-law, Adela Du Bois. For her lifelong care of the family," she let the word family sink in. With a tiny, deliberate pause. It was the first blow. For the first time, I saw fear in their eyes, real fear. This wasn't the tantrum of an old woman. This was a prepared, professional assault. "We'll challenge it," Travanti shouted. "We'll prove she's incompetent." Vetter nodded, almost kindly. You can try. But to challenge the will, you'll need to prove you're the rightful heir. And that, Mr. Dubois, will require a full and public investigation of your family's lineage. Every record, every document, every ancestor. She let the words float in the air. A full, public genealogy investigation. It hit the room like an invisible explosion. Kesha staggered and gripped a chair. But Travanti, he understood. The blood drained from his face. His lips turned blue. He had no idea what the truth was. But he sensed the danger. He sensed that something monstrous was hiding behind the Dubois name he worshipped for the first time. He looked at me with terror, real, deep terror. The quiet old woman they had dismissed now held their fate in her hands, and she was ready to cut the thread. Vetter nodded to me and left, closing the door with a soft click that sounded like a gunshot. The three of us stood in silence. Travanti's shock finally erupted into fury. What have you done? He screamed. You want to destroy your own family? Throw us out on the street? He moved toward me with the same violent look he'd had the day he locked us in the basement. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I met his eyes with calm certainty. Kessia began pacing wildly. What genealogy? What did she mean? What are you hiding? What shame, what secret? They yelled, accused, threatened. They talked about mental hospitals, court orders, humiliation. None of it touched me. Eventually, their voices cracked, then faded, and then came the performance. Kesha collapsed into a chair, covering her face, fake sobs shaking her shoulders. Miss Adela, Mama, how could you do this? We are family. We just wanted what was best for you. We love you. Travanti knelt in front of me. Mama, he said softly, reaching for my elbow. I pulled back. You raised me. You sacrificed everything for me. Are you really going to ruin my life now? Is that what all your sacrifices were for? He looked up at me with trembling eyes, playing the role of the wounded son. It almost worked, not on my heart, but on my memory. For a second, I saw the boy he once was, and then it passed. I felt only pity, not for him, but for the man he had grown into, a man whose entire identity was built on a name that wasn't his. When I finally spoke, my voice was so calm that they both jolted. The house, I said, is the least of your problems. He blinked. You built your whole life, I continued softly, on a legacy that never belonged to you. His face twisted in confusion and dread. What legacy? He whispered. What are you saying? I am a Dubois. I held his gaze. Your grandfather, Langston Dubois, was indeed a great man, and he was very kind. He gave your father his name to save him. I didn't explain further. I didn't have to. I watched the truth unfold behind his eyes, or worse. The possibilities. His own imagination would torture him far better than I ever could. I stood up. My voice stayed steady. You have 3 days to move out. Then I left them standing there in their fear and silence. 3 days passed. They didn't leave. They whispered behind closed doors, phones ringing non-stop. They had one last move left, and I was ready for it. On the evening of the 3rd day, Travanti appeared in my doorway wearing an expensive suit, pale but determined. Tomorrow at 11, he said stiffly, at our townhouse. Everyone will be there, Uncle Peter and Vera, my business partners. Bring your lawyer. We'll settle this. A final battle. They wanted to crush me publicly, declare me incompetent, seize control. They still believed they could win. The next morning, Vetter and I stepped into their perfectly decorated, lifeless apartment. It was filled with relatives I hadn't seen in years, and strangers with cold business faces. Their army, and they thought I had come alone. It was over. I could see it on everyone's faces. Uncle Peter stood up slowly, walked to the table, and picked up my father-in-law's letter. He read it carefully, then he looked at Travanti with such disappointment and disgust that my son seemed to shrink in front of him. The business partners rose from their chairs without a word and headed for the door. They didn't want to be involved with a man who turned out to be a fraud and who wasn't even a real Du Bois spy. Blood, his most valuable possession, his proud last name, crumbled right there in front of them. Kessia clung to her husband's arm. Her face was pale with fear. She looked at the guests leaving, at the life collapsing around her. And in that moment, I think she hated him. Travanti stood alone in the center of the room, completely alone. No support, no sympathy, no dignity left. He wasn't destroyed by lawyers or courts. He was destroyed by the truth I had revealed piece by piece, calmly and precisely, the way an archivist reveals history. His final attempt to control me became a public downfall he created for himself. I didn't look back at him. I simply turned around and walked out of the room. Vada followed me. We stepped outside into the cool spring air. It felt fresher than it ever had before. We didn't need to speak. Everything had already been said. 6 months later, autumn arrived, painting the garden in gold and red. The house was quiet now, but the silence no longer hurt me. It felt peaceful, like something healing, not mourning. Cornelius passed away at the end of summer. In his sleep, his tired heart finally gave out. Softly and without struggle, I held his hand until the very end. We didn't talk about Travanti. We didn't talk about betrayal or the past. We talked about the early years, our first date in Forsyth Park, his clumsy attempt to fix a leaking faucet. We said goodbye gently. When he died, I mourned the man I loved, my Cornelius, not the name he carried, but the heart he had. I buried him beside his adoptive father, Langston Du Bois, to good men, forever tied by love and fate. What happened to Travanti didn't come to the funeral. He and Kessia disappeared afterward, leaving the city to escape the shame. They sold their apartment to pay off debts I never knew existed. His perfect world built on the prestige of the Du Bois name collapsed in a single day. Partners abandoned him. Friends stopped answering his calls. The high society he tried so desperately to impress closed its doors forever. I heard from a distant relative that they moved to a small town in Alabama. Kessia found work as a receptionist in a beauty salon. Nothing was heard about Travanti. He never called, never wrote. To me, he simply stopped existing, like the ghost I once said he was. I didn't feel hatred, only a quiet emptiness where maternal love used to live. My new beginning today. I went down to the basement, no longer the dark, suffocating room where my awakening began. I had hired workers to clean it, paint the walls, and add bright lighting. Now, instead of dusty jars, fresh pine shelves lined the room, filling it with the warm smell of wood. And in the center stood my new work table. This space, once my prison, had become my sanctuary, my archive, my place of rebirth. I laid out old photographs, letters, and documents. All my life I had cared for other people's stories, the Du Bois family, my husband, my son. I preserved their pasts, protected their memories, but now it was time to preserve my own. I took out a new leather-bound album. On the first page, I placed Langston's letter, the one that started everything. Beside it, I added a small black and white photo of a young woman with glasses and short hair, surrounded by books. It was me, Della, at 20 years old, bright-eyed, passionate, full of dreams. The girl I had buried under years of sacrifice. I smiled at her. I had spent decades trying to find my way back to her. And now, at last, I wasn't just a keeper of stories anymore. I was the author of my own. I placed each memory carefully, giving meaning to what mattered and letting the rest fall away. When I finished, I walked to the small window facing the garden. From down here, I didn't see the leaves, I saw the roots, reaching deep into the earth, a reminder that new life grows from what has fallen. I placed a cup of Earl Grey on the sill. The steam fogged the glass, turning the world outside into a soft watercolor. For the first time in years, I felt calm. Hold up myself. Not a wife, Not a mother, not a caretaker, just Adela, a woman standing in her own light. Free at last. Absolutely free.out, RO YouTube style. That's where my story ends. Thank you for spending this time with me. If it touched your heart, please like and subscribe. Your support means the world. Now, tell me, did this story resonate with you? What would you have done in Adela's place? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, more life stories are waiting for you on the screen. Thank you for listening. With love and respect until the next story.